I never thought a 2-foot pile of snow would turn into the battle that would define an entire winter. But here I was, standing in my driveway in Lakewood, Colorado, staring at a bright orange citation taped to my garage door. My name is Greg Norton, and I have been living in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision for exactly 3 years. When my wife Sarah and I first moved here, we thought we had found the perfect slice of suburban paradise. The houses were well maintained, the lawns were pristine, and the neighborhood seemed peaceful. What we did not realize was that this peace came at a price, and that price was enforced by the iron fist of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association, led by their ruthless president, Karren Whitmore. I pulled the citation off my garage door and read it with growing disbelief. The fine was for $300. $300 for what they described as an excessive accumulation of snow exceeding the allowable height limit. According to the citation, my snow pile measured 27 inches at its highest point, which was 3 inches over the allowed 24-inch maximum. I looked back at my driveway, where I had spent 2 hours the previous evening clearing the snow from the latest winter storm. The pile I had created along the edge of my property was barely knee-high, sitting exactly where it would not obstruct anything or anyone. It was February in Colorado. We got snow. That was just how things worked. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Sarah, who was visiting her sister in California for the week. "How is everything? Any problems?" I considered not telling her about the citation, but we had always been honest with each other. "HOA just fined us $300 for snow pile being too tall," I typed back. Her response came within seconds. "Are you serious? That's insane." "Completely serious," I replied. "Going to figure this out." I went inside and immediately pulled up the HOA bylaws on my laptop. I had to dig through pages of regulations about fence heights, approved paint colors, and acceptable mailbox designs before I found the section about snow removal. Sure enough, buried in subsection 4.7.2, there was indeed a clause stating that snow piles on residential properties could not exceed 24 inches in height at any point. The rule itself was ridiculous, but what made it worse was the enforcement. I had lived here for 3 winters now, and I had never heard of anyone being cited for this. I looked out my window at my neighbor's house across the street. Their snow pile was easily 3 feet high, maybe more. 2 houses down, the Richardsons had snow piled up along their entire driveway that had to be pushing 4 feet. This was targeted. This was personal. Karren Whitmore had it out for me ever since the incident 6 months ago, when I had questioned her decision to raise our HOA dues by 30% at a community meeting. She had stood at the front of the room, her perfectly styled blonde bob not moving an inch as she explained that the increase was necessary for community improvements. When I asked for a detailed breakdown of where that money would go, she had looked at me like I had just spit on the American flag. "Mr. Norton, the board has carefully considered all expenses," she had said, her voice dripping with condescension. "If you do not trust our judgment, perhaps you should consider living somewhere without the benefits of a homeowners association." I had pushed back, pointing out that, as paying members, we had a right to know exactly what we were funding. Several other homeowners had nodded in agreement. Karen's face had turned an impressive shade of red, and she had adjourned the meeting abruptly. The dues increase had passed anyway at the next meeting, but Karren had clearly not forgotten my challenge to her authority. Now, standing in my living room with this absurd citation in hand, I knew this was her revenge. She was going to make my life difficult, one petty fine at a time. I was not the type to back down from a fight, especially when I was in the right. I grabbed my phone and called the HOA office. The phone rang 6 times before someone picked up. Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association, this is Deborah speaking. Hi Deborah, this is Greg Norton. I just received a citation for my snow pile height, and I need to speak with someone about contesting it. There was a pause. Oh, Mr. Norton. Yes, I see that citation here in the system. If you want to contest it, you will need to submit a written appeal within 10 business days. Can I schedule a meeting with the board to discuss this in person? The next board meeting is not until next month, but you can submit your appeal, and they will review it then. Next month. Of course. They would make me wait while the fine accrued late fees if I did not pay it immediately. What happens if I do not pay by the due date? I asked. Late fees of $50 per week will be added to your account, Deborah said in a tone that suggested she had delivered this news many times before. That's outrageous. Those are the rules, Mr. Norton. They are all outlined in your HOA bylaws, which you agreed to when you purchased your property. I thanked her and hung up, my jaw clenched with frustration. Sarah called me a minute later. What are you going to do? She asked. I am going to fight this, I said. This is harassment, pure and simple. My pile is barely over their arbitrary limit, and there are houses all over this neighborhood with snow piles twice as high as mine. You know Karren is doing this to get back at you. I know, but she picked the wrong guy to mess with. Over the next few days, I documented everything. I walked through the entire neighborhood with my phone, taking videos and photos of every single snow pile I could find. Out of the 43 houses in Meadowbrook Heights, 38 had snow piles that exceeded the 24-inch limit. Some were dramatically over. The Martins on Oakwood Drive had a mountain of snow that had to be 6 feet tall where their plow service had pushed everything to the corner of their lot. I compiled all my evidence into a detailed report, complete with measurements, timestamps, and addresses. I submitted my written appeal to the HOA, including all my documentation and a formal request for the fine to be dismissed based on selective enforcement. 2 weeks went by with no response. Then 3 weeks. The due date for my fine came and went, and an updated statement appeared in my mailbox showing that I now owed $400 with the late fee added. I called the HOA office again. This time, Karren Whitmore herself answered. Mr. Norton, how can I help you? Her voice was sugary sweet, which made it even more irritating. I submitted an appeal 3 weeks ago with extensive documentation, and I have not received any response. Appeals take time to process, Mr. Norton. The board has many important matters to attend to. The selective enforcement of this rule is discriminatory, I said, keeping my voice level. I have documented 38 other properties in violation of the same regulation, none of which have received citations. The HOA board conducts regular inspections and issues citations based on what we observe during those inspections. Just because another violation has not been cited, yet does not mean it will not be addressed. So you are telling me you just happened to inspect my property and no one else's? Mr. Norton, your tone is becoming hostile. I suggest you wait for the board's response to your appeal. Good day. She hung up on me. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling my blood pressure rising. This was exactly what she wanted. She wanted me to lose my temper, to do something rash that would give her ammunition to fine me even more or start other proceedings against me. But I had a different idea. My company, Norton Contracting, specialized in commercial snow removal. I owned 3 plow trucks and had a crew of 5 guys who worked for me during the winter months, clearing parking lots for businesses all over the Denver metro area. We had contracts with shopping centers, office buildings, and several small business parks. It was good, steady work, and we were busy whenever the snow fell. The idea came to me on a Thursday night while I was sitting in my home office, staring at my HOA fine and thinking about the 20 tons of snow my crew had just cleared from a shopping center earlier that day. We had pushed all that snow to the back of the property and piled it up in a massive mound that would take weeks to melt. That snow had to go somewhere. According to HOA rules, it could not stay piled up on my property over 24 inches high. But the rules did not say anything about where else I could put it. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA office was located in a small commercial building at the entrance to our subdivision. It shared the building with a real estate office and a small insurance agency. Behind the building was a parking lot with about 30 spaces, most of which were empty most of the time since the HOA office was only open part-time. That parking lot was not technically part of the HOA-governed residential property. It was commercial property, which meant the HOA's residential snow pile height regulations did not apply there. I smiled for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I got another call from the HOA office. It was not Karren this time, but Deborah. "Mr. Norton, your appeal has been denied by the board. The fine stands, and with accumulated late fees, your total balance is now $450. If payment is not received within 5 days, additional action may be taken, including the placement of a lien on your property." A lien on my property over a snow pile. This was insanity. "I want to see the board's written decision and their reasoning for the denial," I said. "That will be mailed to you. I want it today. Email it to me." "I will see what I can do," she hung up. The email never came. 3 days later, I received a letter in the mail that was so generic it was almost funny. "The board has reviewed your appeal and finds no merit to your claims. The citation was properly issued according to HOA bylaws. Please remit payment immediately." No explanation. No response to my documentation of selective enforcement. Nothing. Fine. If that was how they wanted to play this, I would play along. That weekend, we got another major snowstorm. 15 inches fell across the metro area, and my phone was ringing off the hook with clients needing their properties cleared. My crew and I worked around the clock for 2 days straight, plowing parking lots from Golden to Aurora. On Sunday night, after we had finished our last contracted job, I called my crew together. There were 5 of them: Danny, Mike, Carlos, Pete, and young Trevor, who was just 22 and eager to prove himself. "Guys, I need a favor," I said. "I will pay you double overtime rates, but I need you to trust me on something." Danny, who had been with me the longest, raised an eyebrow. "What kind of favor?" I explained the situation with the HOA, the ridiculous fine, and Karren Whitmore's vendetta against me. Then I laid out my plan. "So let me get this straight," Mike said, grinning. "You want us to dump all the snow from our jobs onto the HOA parking lot, not all of it. But yes, a significant amount. I have checked the property records. That parking lot is commercial property, not governed by HOA residential rules. They cannot fine me for snow pile height there because their rules do not apply. And as far as I can tell, there are no municipal ordinances against it, either, as long as we are not blocking fire lanes or access routes." Carlos laughed. "Man, they are going to lose their minds." "Probably," I agreed. "But they will not have any legal grounds to stop me. I have already talked to my lawyer just to be sure." That was true. I had spent an hour on the phone with Tom Reynolds, an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. He had listened to my story and then done some research. "Technically, what you are proposing is not illegal," Tom had said. "The HOA bylaws only govern residential properties within the subdivision. Commercial properties, even those owned by the HOA, are not subject to the same rules. And as long as you are not violating any city ordinances about snow disposal, you are in the clear. That said, this is going to make you some serious enemies. I already have enemies, I had replied. At least this way I will have a smile on my face. My crew was all in. We had been working together for years, and they were loyal guys who appreciated that I treated them well and paid them fairly. The idea of sticking it to an overbearing HOA appealed to their sense of justice. Monday morning, we had 3 large commercial properties to clear. By the end of the day, we had accumulated roughly 40 tons of snow in our dump trucks. Instead of taking it to our usual disposal site, we drove in a convoy to the Meadowbrook Heights HOA parking lot. It was 6 in the evening, already dark, and the parking lot was empty except for one car. The lights were on in the HOA office, which meant someone was working late. Perfect. "Where do you want it, boss?" Danny asked over the radio. "Spread it out. I want to use about half the parking lot. Make it neat. We are not here to damage anything or block emergency access, just depositing snow." For the next 45 minutes, my crew expertly maneuvered the trucks and used the plows to create an impressive field of snow across 15 parking spaces. The piles were easily 5 feet high in some places, but they were neatly arranged and did not block the building entrance or any fire lanes. I stayed in my truck, watching and documenting everything with my phone. I could see someone moving around inside the HOA office, occasionally looking out the window. About halfway through our operation, the office door opened, and Karren Whitmore herself stepped out. She stood there in her designer coat and expensive boots, staring at our trucks with her mouth hanging open. I rolled down my window. "Good evening, Karren," I called out cheerfully. "Just doing some snow disposal, do not mind us." She found her voice. "What do you think you are doing?" "You cannot dump snow here. Actually, I can. This is commercial property, not residential. Your HOA bylaws about snow pile height do not apply here, I checked." Her face was turning red even in the cold. "This is HOA property. You are trespassing." "I am not trespassing. This is a public parking lot for the businesses in this building. I have as much right to be here as anyone else, and I am not breaking any laws or ordinances, just disposing of snow in a legal manner." "I will call the police." "Feel free," I said calmly. "I will wait right here." She pulled out her phone and made a call, speaking rapidly and gesturing wildly at my trucks. I could not hear what she was saying, but I could imagine. My crew finished their work and pulled their trucks to the side of the lot where they would not be in the way. 15 minutes later, a Lakewood Police Department cruiser pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. An officer stepped out, a middle-aged guy with a tired expression that suggested he had seen it all. Karren immediately rushed over to him, pointing at me and my trucks and talking animatedly. The officer listened, nodded a few times, and then walked over to my truck. I rolled down my window again. "Evening, officer. I am Greg Norton. Is there a problem?" "Sir, I got a call about illegal dumping. Can you explain what you are doing here?" "Absolutely. I run a snow removal business. This parking lot is commercial property and is open to the public. I am disposing of snow here, which is not against any city ordinances as far as I am aware. I have not blocked any fire lanes or emergency access routes, and I have not damaged any property." The officer looked over at the field of snow, then back at me. "This is a lot of snow." "Yes, sir. We have been clearing commercial lots all day. It has to go somewhere." Karren had followed the officer over. "He is doing this to harass me. He has a grudge against the HOA." The officer held up a hand. "Madam, please let me handle this." He turned back to me. "Is that true? Are you doing this because of a dispute with the HOA? I chose my words carefully. I do have an ongoing dispute with the HOA regarding what I believe is selective enforcement of their rules and unfair fines. However, what I am doing here is completely legal. I am not breaking any laws. I am simply using a public parking lot to dispose of snow. The officer nodded slowly. Technically, he is right, he said to Karren. If this is public commercial property and he is not violating any ordinances, I cannot cite him for anything. But this is our parking lot. Madam, is this property owned by the HOA or do you lease this office space? Karren faltered. We lease it. Then it is not your parking lot. It belongs to the property owner. If they have a problem with how their parking lot is being used, they can contact him directly. But from a law enforcement perspective, no crime is being committed here. Karren's face was now a deep shade of purple. This is unacceptable. I want to file a complaint. You can file a complaint with the property owner or pursue civil action if you believe you have grounds. But again, I cannot arrest or cite anyone here for illegal activity because there is no illegal activity happening. The officer gave me a long look. Sir, I am guessing this is going to cause you some problems down the line. Probably, I agreed. But sometimes you have to stand up for what is right, even if it is inconvenient. He nodded slowly, a hint of a smile on his face. Just make sure you stay on the right side of the law. Always, officer. He got back in his cruiser and left. Karren stood in the parking lot, shaking with rage, staring at the mountains of snow that now covered a significant portion of the parking area. You are going to regret this, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Maybe, I said, but my snow pile at home is now well under 24 inches. Problem solved. I drove home feeling better than I had in weeks. Sarah called just as I was pulling into my driveway. How did it go? She asked. She had been following along with my plan all day via text messages. Perfectly. You should have seen Karren's face. Sarah laughed, but there was worry in her voice too. Greg, I support you, but I am concerned about what comes next. These people can make our lives really difficult. They were already making our lives difficult, I pointed out. At least now I am fighting back. Over the next few days, the response was exactly what I had expected. The HOA sent me a cease and desist letter demanding that I remove the snow from their parking lot immediately. I responded through my attorney, pointing out again that the parking lot was not governed by HOA bylaws, and that I had no legal obligation to remove snow from property I did not own. The property owner of the commercial building, a guy named Richard Chen who owned several small office buildings around the area, called me directly. Mr. Norton, I need to ask you to stop putting snow in my parking lot, he said. He sounded more tired than angry. Mr. Chen, I understand this is inconvenient, but I am not doing anything illegal. The HOA has been harassing me with unreasonable fines and I am making a point. I get it, I really do. HOAs can be terrible. But Karren Whitmore has been calling me non-stop, and she is threatening to break their lease if I do not do something about this. I cannot afford to lose a tenant right now. I felt a pang of guilt. Richard Chen was just a regular guy trying to make a living. He did not deserve to be caught in the middle of this fight. I tell you what, I said. Give me a week to make my point and I will clear the snow out of there. I will do it for free as an apology for the inconvenience. But I need the HOA to understand they cannot just push people around without consequences. Richard was quiet for a moment. 1 week, that's it. Then it all has to go. Deal. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Yeah, well, I hope it is worth it. Karren Whitmore is telling everyone in the neighborhood that you are some kind of menace. That did not surprise me. Over the next few days, I got the cold shoulder from several neighbors who had previously been friendly. Karren had been busy spreading her version of events, painting me as an unhinged troublemaker who was disrupting the entire community. But not everyone was buying her story. A few neighbors reached out to me directly, including Tom Hendricks from 2 streets over. "I heard about what you did," Tom said when he stopped by my house. "I think it is hilarious. Karren Whitmore has been a tyrant since she got elected HOA president. Someone needed to stand up to her." "I appreciate the support," I said, "though it seems like I am in the minority opinion around here." "You are not. Trust me. A lot of people are sick of the HOA's nonsense. They are just afraid to say anything because they do not want to be targeted next." Tom's words stuck with me. This was not just about me and my snow pile fine. This was about a culture of fear and intimidation that Karren Whitmore had cultivated in our neighborhood. People were afraid to speak up, afraid to question, afraid to push back against unreasonable rules and fines. The following week, we got another major snowstorm. 18 inches this time. My crew and I worked for 3 straight days clearing our contracted properties, and every single load of snow went to the HOA parking lot. By the time we were done, the parking lot looked like a scene from an Arctic expedition. Snow was piled 8 feet high in some places. There was barely enough room for 2 cars to park. It was magnificent. Karren Whitmore filed for an emergency restraining order to stop me from dumping more snow. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday in Jefferson County District Court. Tom Reynolds, my attorney, met me at the courthouse that morning. "This should be interesting," he said. "Karren and the HOA board are claiming you are engaged in harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. All I am doing is disposing of snow legally." "I know. And that's exactly what we will argue." The hearing took place in front of Judge Patricia Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on her nose. Karren Whitmore was there with the HOA's attorney, a slick-looking guy named Brandon West who specialized in HOA law. Brandon West presented their case first, arguing that I was engaged in a targeted harassment campaign against the HOA and that my actions were causing significant disruption to their business operations. "Your Honor, Mr. Norton is not simply disposing of snow," West argued. "He is deliberately dumping massive quantities of snow in a location specifically chosen to harass and intimidate our clients. This is retaliatory behavior stemming from a legitimate fine issued by the HOA for violation of community rules." Judge Morrison looked at me. "Mr. Norton, is this true? Are you dumping snow on the HOA parking lot to retaliate against them for fining you?" Tom Reynolds stood up. "Your Honor, if I may address the court." "Go ahead, counselor." Mr. Norton is a licensed snow removal contractor who has been operating his business for 8 years without any complaints or legal issues. He was cited by the HOA for having a snow pile on his residential property that exceeded their height limit by 3 inches. Mr. Norton documented extensive evidence of selective enforcement, showing that dozens of other properties in the same neighborhood had much larger snow piles that were not cited. His appeal was denied without any substantive response to his evidence. The question before this court is not whether Mr. Norton's actions were motivated by frustration with the HOA. The question is whether those actions were legal, and the answer is unequivocally yes. The parking lot in question is commercial property that is not governed by HOA bylaws. Mr. Norton has not violated any city ordinances, has not blocked emergency access, and has not damaged any property. He has simply disposed of snow in a legal location. Judge Morrison looked at Brandon West. "Counselor, does the HOA have any ownership interest in the parking lot in question?" No, Your Honor, but they are a tenant in the building, and this activity is interfering with their ability to conduct business. Is the parking lot full? Can people still park there? West hesitated. There is limited space remaining, yes. So people can still access the building and conduct business. Technically, yes, but then I am not seeing the legal basis for a restraining order. Mr. Norton is not engaging in illegal activity. If the property owner wants to pursue civil action against him for interfering with use of the parking lot, that is a separate matter. But I am not going to issue a restraining order preventing someone from doing something that is not against the law. Karren Whitmore stood up suddenly. Your Honor, this man is making a mockery of our community standards. He has no respect for rules or authority. Judge Morrison gave her a stern look. Madam, you are not an attorney and you need to remain seated unless you are called to testify. But sit down, please. Karren sat, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Judge Morrison turned back to the attorneys. I am denying the request for a restraining order. However, I am going to strongly suggest that both parties attempt to resolve this dispute through mediation before it escalates further. Mr. Norton, while your actions are legal, they are clearly provocative. Mrs. Whitmore, your HOA would be well served to review your enforcement policies and ensure they are being applied fairly across the community. This court is adjourned. We walked out of the courthouse into the cold February afternoon. Tom Reynolds was grinning. That went about as well as we could have hoped, he said. So I can keep dumping snow on their parking lot. Legally, yes. But the judge was right about one thing. This is escalating. At some point, something is going to give. He was right. I knew that. But I had come too far to back down now. That night I got a call from Richard Chen again. Mr. Norton, our week is up. I really need you to clear that snow now. The HOA is threatening legal action against me, and other tenants in the building are complaining. I understand, Mr. Chen. I will take care of it this weekend. I am sorry for the trouble. Just get it done, please. I gathered my crew on Saturday morning. Instead of dumping more snow, we spent the entire day loading the accumulated snow from the HOA parking lot into our trucks and hauling it to a proper disposal site. It took us 12 hours, but by the end of the day, the parking lot was clear. I was exhausted, covered in snow and ice, and my back was killing me. But I had made my point. The whole neighborhood had watched this drama unfold. Karren Whitmore's attempts to silence me through legal action had failed. And most importantly, people were now questioning the HOA's enforcement policies. The following Tuesday, I received a notice in the mail about a special HOA meeting scheduled for that weekend. The agenda included a discussion about enforcement policies and community standards. I had a feeling Karren was going to use this meeting to rally support against me. I decided to attend. Sarah was still in California, but she encouraged me to go and speak my mind. Just keep your cool, she warned. Do not let Karren bait you into losing your temper. The meeting was held in the community center at the entrance to our subdivision. When I arrived, the room was packed. I had never seen this many people at an HOA meeting. Usually, only a handful of residents showed up. Tonight, there had to be at least 60 people crammed into the small room. Karren Whitmore stood at the front, flanked by the other board members. Frank Martinez, the treasurer, Sandra Chen, the secretary, and Bob Patterson, a board member at large. They all looked uncomfortable except for Karren, who wore an expression of grim determination. Thank you all for coming, Karren began. We have called this special meeting to address a serious situation that has been disrupting our community. As many of you know, one of our residents has been engaging in behavior that, while perhaps technically legal, is completely inappropriate and against the spirit of community cooperation that makes Meadowbrook Heights such a wonderful place to live. She did not mention me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Several people turned to look at me. The HOA board exists to maintain standards and ensure that all residents are following the rules that we all agreed to when we purchased our homes. When someone flagrantly disregards those rules and then retaliates against the HOA for enforcing them, it undermines the entire foundation of our community. Tom Hendricks raised his hand. "Karren, can I ask a question?" She looked annoyed. "This is not a question and answer session, Tom. I am making a statement on behalf of the board. With all due respect, this is a community meeting and we have a right to participate," Tom said, standing up. "I want to know why Greg Norton was cited for a snow pile violation when there are dozens of other properties in this neighborhood with snow piles that are much larger. I have been taking pictures myself over the past few weeks, and the selective enforcement is obvious." Several other people murmured in agreement. Karren's smile was tight. "The HOA conducts regular inspections of all properties. Citations are issued based on what we observe during those inspections. Every violation will eventually be addressed." "That is not an answer," said a woman I recognized as Jennifer Douglas from Maple Street. "Why was Greg's property specifically targeted when so many others are in violation of the same rule?" "We prioritize violations based on severity and visibility," Karren said, her voice rising slightly. "Mr. Norton's property is near the entrance to the neighborhood and is highly visible. We have standards to maintain." I had been sitting quietly, but now I stood up. "Karren, let us be honest about what this is really about. You find me because I questioned your decision to raise HOA dues at the meeting last fall. You find me because I dared to ask for financial transparency. This has nothing to do with snow pile height and everything to do with silencing dissent." The room erupted in conversation. Multiple people were talking at once. Karren banged a gavel on the table. "Order, Mr. Norton. Your accusations are baseless and offensive. The board acts in the best interest of the community always." "Then show us the financial records," I said. "Show us exactly where our dues are going. Show us the inspection records that prove you are not selectively enforcing rules based on personal vendettas." Frank Martinez, the treasurer, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sandra Chen was staring at her hands. Only Bob Patterson met my eyes and he looked troubled. "Financial records are reviewed at our annual meeting," Karren said coldly. "If you want to see them, you can attend that meeting." "The annual meeting is not for another 4 months, Tom Hendricks pointed out. "And even then, you only show us summary reports. We never get detailed breakdowns of expenses." More murmuring from the crowd. I could see that the tide was turning. People were paying attention now, asking questions they should have been asking all along. A man I did not recognize stood up near the back. "I am David Kowalski, and I have lived here for 7 years. I have always thought the HOA was too aggressive with fines and enforcement, but I never said anything because I did not want to be targeted. But what is happening to Greg Norton could happen to any of us. We need accountability. We need transparency." Others voiced their agreement. Karren was losing control of the room and she knew it. "This meeting is adjourned," she announced abruptly. "The board will take your concerns under advisement." "You cannot just adjourn the meeting because you do not like what you are hearing," Jennifer Douglas protested. "We have a right to discuss these issues." But Karren and the other board members were already gathering their papers and heading for the door. The crowd erupted in frustrated conversation. Tom Hendricks came over to me. "That was something. I have never seen Karren lose control like that. She has been running this HOA like her personal fiefdom for too long," I said. People are finally waking up. Over the next few weeks, momentum built within the community. Tom Hendricks and Jennifer Douglas organized a petition calling for a special election to recall the current HOA board and elect new leadership. They needed signatures from 30% of homeowners to trigger the election. Within 10 days, they had 45%. Karren Whitmore did not go quietly. She sent out mass emails warning residents that the recall effort was being led by troublemakers who wanted to eliminate community standards entirely. She claimed that without strong HOA enforcement, property values would plummet and the neighborhood would descend into chaos. But her scare tactics were not working anymore. Too many people had their own stories of unreasonable fines, selective enforcement, and HOA overreach. The dam had broken, and all the accumulated frustration was pouring out. The recall election was scheduled for mid-March. In the meantime, I received a final notice from the HOA demanding payment of my snow pile fine, which had now ballooned to $700 with late fees. I sent them a check for the original $300 along with a letter stating that I was paying the base fine under protest, but refusing to pay the late fees, as the fine itself was illegitimate, and my appeal had been denied without proper consideration. I made it clear that if they attempted to place a lien on my property, I would pursue legal action for harassment and selective enforcement. Tom Reynolds advised me that this was a calculated risk. They could still try to lien your property, but given everything that is happening with the recall election, I think they are going to be reluctant to escalate further. They are in survival mode right now. He was right. I never heard back about the late fees. Sarah finally returned from California in early March, just as things were reaching a fever pitch. She walked into our house, dropped her bags, and said, "I cannot believe everything that happened while I was gone. You started a revolution." "I just refused to accept being bullied," I said, hugging her. "Other people did the real work. Tom Hendricks told me you are thinking about running for the HOA board yourself. I had been thinking about it." Several people had approached me after the disastrous community meeting, suggesting I should run in the recall election. I had always avoided getting too involved in neighborhood politics, but now I felt obligated. If I was going to criticize the system, I should be willing to help fix it. "I might," I admitted. "Would you be okay with that?" Sarah smiled. "I married you because you stand up for what is right, even when it is not easy. If you want to do this, I am behind you 100%. I submitted my name for the ballot the next day. The recall election would include positions for all 5 board seats: president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and member at large. 7 people total were running, including Tom Hendricks and Jennifer Douglas. Karren Whitmore was running for re-election as president. In her campaign statement, she positioned herself as the guardian of community standards against a mob of anarchists who wanted to destroy everything she had built. The campaign period was only 2 weeks, but it was intense. There were debates, email exchanges, and multiple candidate forums. Karren was increasingly desperate, making wilder and wilder claims about what would happen if she lost. At the final candidate forum 2 days before the election, she went off the rails completely. "If these people take over the board, this neighborhood will fall apart," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "There will be no standards, no enforcement, no accountability. People will paint their houses any color they want. They will park RVs in their driveways. They will let their lawns die. Everything we have worked for will be destroyed." I was given a chance to respond. "What Karren is describing is a fantasy designed to scare you. None of the candidates running for change have suggested eliminating reasonable rules. What we want is fair enforcement, transparency, and an HOA board that serves the community instead of ruling over it. We want a board that respects homeowners as partners, not subjects." The audience applauded. I could see Karren's face tightening with fury. Election day was a Saturday in mid-March. Voting was conducted by paper ballot at the community center from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening. Turnout was unprecedented. In previous HOA elections, maybe 15 or 20% of homeowners bothered to vote. This time, more than 70% cast ballots. The results were counted that evening in front of witnesses from both sides. Sarah and I waited at the community center along with dozens of other residents. When the results were announced, it was a landslide. Karren Whitmore was defeated for president by a margin of 3-1. Frank Martinez and Sandra Chen both lost their positions as well. Bob Patterson kept his seat as member at large, probably because he had visibly distanced himself from Karren during the final weeks of the campaign. Tom Hendricks was elected president. Jennifer Douglas became vice president. I won the treasurer position. A woman named Patricia Morris became secretary, and Bob Patterson retained his member-at-large position. Karren Whitmore sat in the corner of the room, staring at the results with an expression of shock and disbelief. She had been so certain of her position, so confident in her authority, that she genuinely seemed unable to process what had happened. As people began to leave, she stood up and walked out without a word to anyone. The following week, the new board held its first meeting. Our first order of business was to conduct a comprehensive review of HOA finances and enforcement records. What we found was disturbing. Karren had been using HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, disguising them as community improvement costs or administrative expenses. She had spent thousands of dollars on furniture for her own home, claiming it was for the HOA office. She had used HOA money to pay for landscaping at her personal residence, calling it a model property maintenance demonstration. There were dozens of questionable expenses, totaling more than $30,000 over the past 3 years. The enforcement records were even worse. Karren had been systematically targeting anyone who questioned her authority with citations for minor or fabricated violations. My snow pile fine was just the tip of the iceberg. There were fines for grass being a 1/4 inch too tall, for mailboxes being the wrong shade of approved colors, for holiday decorations being left up 1 day past the deadline. "This is fraud," Tom Hendricks said, looking at the financial records. "We need to report this to the authorities." I agreed. As treasurer, it was my responsibility to ensure proper handling of HOA funds. We contacted the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office and provided them with all the documentation we had found. The investigation took 2 months. During that time, Karren Whitmore hired an expensive attorney and released a statement claiming that any financial irregularities were honest mistakes and that she had always acted in the best interest of the community. But the evidence was overwhelming. In May, Karren Whitmore was charged with theft and embezzlement of HOA funds. The charges were serious. She was facing potential jail time if convicted. The preliminary hearing was held in early June. Sarah and I attended, along with several other board members and interested residents. Karren looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her expensive clothes and perfect hair could not hide the fear in her eyes. The judge reviewed the evidence and found probable cause to proceed to trial. Karren's attorney tried to argue that this was a civil matter, not a criminal one, but the judge disagreed. The amount of money involved and the clear intent to deceive made this a criminal case. The trial was scheduled for September, but in August, Karren accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of theft and 2 counts of fraud. She was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, with the possibility of early release after 12 months for good behavior. She was also ordered to make full restitution to the HOA for all misappropriated funds. Standing in the courtroom as the judge handed down the sentence, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. Karren had abused her power and stolen from the community, and she was facing consequences. But another part of me felt sad. This whole situation could have been avoided if there had been proper oversight and accountability from the beginning. After the sentencing, several reporters approached me outside the courthouse. The case had gotten local media attention as an example of HOA abuse and financial misconduct. "Mr. Norton, you were the one who first challenged Karren Whitmore's authority. Do you feel responsible for uncovering this fraud?" a reporter from a local Denver news station asked. "I feel responsible for standing up when I saw something wrong," I said carefully. "But the real credit goes to the community members who demanded transparency and accountability. This is what happens when people pay attention and refuse to accept abuse of power." The story ran on the evening news and was picked up by several other outlets. For a few weeks, our little subdivision in Lakewood was a minor news story about HOA reform and accountability. The new HOA board worked hard to rebuild trust and create a better system. We rewrote large sections of the bylaws to include clear standards for enforcement, mandatory financial audits, and a transparent appeals process for citations. We established term limits for board members and created committees to provide oversight on different aspects of HOA management. We also reviewed every outstanding fine and citation from the previous board. Dozens of unfair penalties were dismissed, and refunds were issued where appropriate. The neighborhood changed too. People were more engaged now, attending board meetings and participating in community decisions. There was a sense of ownership and pride that had been missing before. My original $300 snow pile fine was officially dismissed and refunded with interest. It seemed almost funny now, looking back at how something so small had sparked such a massive chain of events. On a cold evening in late October, Sarah and I sat on our back porch with mugs of hot chocolate, watching the first snow of the new season begin to fall. "Are you going to run for the board again next year?" she asked. "I do not know. Maybe. We have built something good here, and I do not want to walk away from it too soon. But eventually, I want to just be a regular homeowner again without all the drama." "You were never meant to be a regular anything," Sarah said with a smile. "When you see something wrong, you cannot help but try to fix it. That is who you are." "Is that a compliment or a complaint?" "It is both," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "But mostly a compliment." The snow continued to fall, accumulating on our driveway and yard. By morning, there would be several inches. I would clear it with my plow, and the snow would pile up along the edge of my property. It might be 24 inches tall. It might be 30 inches. And no one would fine me for it, because we had rules that made sense now, enforced fairly across the entire community. Sometimes standing up for what is right means getting your hands dirty, making enemies and fighting battles you never expected to fight. But it is worth it. Because communities work best when everyone has a voice, when power is checked by accountability, and when people refuse to accept injustice, no matter how small it might seem. As I sat there with my wife, watching the snow fall on our little piece of suburban Colorado, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. Not because the fight was over, but because I knew that when the next fight came, whenever and whatever it might be, I would be ready to stand up again. The story of the HOA snow pile fine became something of a legend in our neighborhood. New residents would hear about it and shake their heads in disbelief. "That really happened here?" they would ask. And we would tell them yes, it really did. And then we would tell them about the changes that came after and the community that grew stronger because people decided they had had enough. Karren Whitmore served her time in county jail and was released after 13 months. I heard she moved to Arizona after her release, leaving Colorado behind entirely. I never saw her again after the sentencing, and I was fine with that. I did not need closure or reconciliation. The whole experience had taught me that sometimes the best ending is simply moving forward without the people who tried to hold you back. The following winter brought even more snow than the year before. My business thrived, and my crew and I spent long days and nights keeping parking lots clear across the metro area. And every time I pushed a load of snow into a neat pile, I thought about that ridiculous fine and everything that came after. I never dumped snow on the HOA parking lot again. I did not need to. The point had been made, the battle had been won, and the community had been transformed. Sometimes revolution starts with something as simple as refusing to accept an unjust fine for a pile of snow that was 3 inches too tall. And sometimes, the most important thing you can do is just stand your ground and say no when people with power try to push you around. It might be inconvenient. It might be difficult. It might turn your life upside down for a while. But in the end, it is always worth it.